is a wonderful example of what's growing in the garden at the moment. Certainly is for here. Hello, I'm Kim Bailey, and I'm here to show you today what you can do when you pick some flowers from the garden and you'd really like to make them into a very special display that showcases the beauty of what you've grown and what you've picked this morning. Now these were picked by my dad. He's 88 and 89 in 5 weeks, he tells me, and he's great at growing them. And he brought them into the house and he put them in the vase, which is a special vase, got special significance, so nobody wants to use this particular vase. And he said in passing, you could do something with them if you want to. So I thought this is a really good opportunity to show you what you can do with the flowers that you grow. Obviously a great selection of wonderful flowers in bloom, and he's done a pretty good job of giving it keeping the colours in a nice framework, giving it some sort of shape rather than just all the same height. And so let's see what we can do with these, and I'm only going to add one more thing because what's missing out of this, there's a little bit of something to rest our eyes. This is spectacular, very busy, things we want to look at all the time, and so we just get distracted by what we're looking at and keep going round and round in the design. So we want something that gives our eyes a little bit of a rest, that helps us to move through the design. And that's the sort of thing when we look at something we think, it's not quite right, I just don't know what it is. So let's see what just a few little leaves, again from the garden, could do for this particular design. So I'm going to take these out and then we're going to work on how we're going to structure the design. I've got to make sure I've got the leaves that I want to use. So what I've picked is just some Vase, nice smooth leaf, a little bit of the green cone there which will add a different sort of contrast to the design. You could just go for the smooth leaves. Remember that what we want to see in here is some sort of contrast. So we've got this unusual shape, it's a little bit of a rough finish to the status, and we've got the smoother shapes of the sunflowers and the dahlias, and we've got the nice smooth stems in the status. We have got a leaf here and there of the sunflowers, I would say. So let's have a look at what we can do just to bring it all together. So as I remove, I'll keep the plant material in its groupings. So, and what I like to do is have it along the bench in the height so that I can see whether I need to adjust things or not. Now he's done the right thing. He's taken off any of the foliage that's going to be below the water. It's in the vase, because what happens if you leave that on is that is what engenders bacteria growth, and that'll make the water smell and your arrangement less than pleasant after a few days, and particularly with the dahlias. And one zinnia, I forgot. That was the discussion at breakfast this morning, was there's one zinnia out there out of all of the ones he planted, there's one that's come up. It's a nice beautiful colour, solid colour to it. So what we have is the vase. Now this is an open-necked vase, obviously. If you wanted to reassure yourself that the placements are going to stay where you want them to, then you could put sticky tape across it in a grid form, and that gives you little spaces where you can put the stems in and that'll hold it together. And then if you want a little bit more space, you pinch the sticky tape so that it gives you a bigger hole. But on this one I'd probably put 2 either way, and that's going to give you plenty of holes to put your plant material and for it to stay in place without you worrying about it moving around while it's in the vase. So we've got the water in there already. With a vase, I would suggest, and I think you'll see it recommended lots of places, that you completely change the water every 2 days. Now, our tendency is to just top it up and that'll be okay. But if you've got any sort of bacterial growth or anything else happening in the water, that's going to affect what's going up into the stems of the flowers. So you need to, my recommendation anyway, is to completely change that water. Give the vase a little bit of a rinse so there's no scum or anything that's going to detract from the plants being able to take up nice, clean, good water. And then refill it with water and you're good to go. And if you've got the grid there, that's so easy to do because you just tip out the water, stick your finger in, give it a bit of a wipe around, and then you've still got, or you can re-put the grid down. But it makes it much easier than worrying about how am I going to keep these flowers together in this arrangement. If you don't use the grid, the other thing that you can do when you've got the arrangement together is put an elastic band around it so it does hold it in the shape that you've decided is the most effective for your particular vase. And that way you just lift it out, clean your vase, put it back in. That also allows you, both methods in fact, allow you to change out some of the plant material. This status is going to last pretty much for as long as we want to have it in the design, and then I will dry it because when it dries it keeps the colour of the flower, so it's perfect to use for all sorts of things. Sunflowers will last for ages. Zinnia next in line. Your dahlia is probably the least amount of time because they are actually quite open. So the difference, let me see that one. So the difference, if you can see, is that this one you can see is completely open. This one not yet open in the centre here. So this one will theoretically last longer than this one. What we used to do when we picked the flowers to sell at the farm gate is that we would always pick them at this stage where they weren't quite open, because that would give people about 10 days worth of the flowers in a vase without them having to do anything at all other than change the water, as we would suggest. Alright, so let's start. And what obviously we've got is the nice long status that can be our height. Looking at the vase, we want something that's at least around about 1.5 times the vase, and that's, although it's often a thing that's mentioned in terms of competition. I know you're not particularly interested in the competition at this stage. What it does do is gives you a visual balance. So if we were to have stuff that was sitting on the top of the vase like that, it just wouldn't look right, and we couldn't work out particularly what it was. If you've got something that is at least the height, and preferably 1.5 times the height, then it's going to look that much more balanced to our eyes. What I'm going to do is just strip off some of this excess on the base of the status, because that will deteriorate. So I'll bring it back to the spine. Making a mess on my good plastic. Sometimes you can just pull it off with your fingers. Now, here we've got a branch that's coming out to the side, and that's going to play a part in how this sits in the design. So sometimes it's better to actually cut that off and to incorporate it somewhere else. So we'll do that. So we've got a nice straight stem to start with. Now I'm not going to use the grid, and I'm not going to use an elastic band, but I am, because I'm confident that I can get the arrangement to where I want it to be. But I do suggest the elastic band method. Now, if we look at this one, we've got one branch going out that way, so this one conveniently, when it was attached, was going the other way, so that we just place it there so that we know that that's the angle that we want. And they will move around a bit because it's a little bit windy, but I will address that shortly. So take the other one. What I'm trying to do is give myself the height of the design before I put in anything else, so that I can balance it all the way through. I'm going to do the same thing with this side one. Take that off. Now here at the base, where he's cut it off the plant, there's quite a thick area of stem, so I'm actually going to trim that a little bit above the joint of where the branch was, just to make it easier for the plant to take up the material. And we're going to cut it on an angle because that gives you the most surface area for the plant to take up the water. That's the reason that we do it. Now, I'm going to do this as though it's facing you, because I know that this is going to go on a table. an entrance table, I suppose you'd call it. And so the back of it is against a mirror. So I want to have something at the back that will be okay when it's reflected, but I want the bulk of the design to be at the front where you'd be looking at it. So have them like that. We'll put one more piece that is actually back facing, so you'll be able to see it from the front of the design, but you'll see a different angle of it, and it will be facing the mirror, so that when you see it in the reflection, it will be part of the design. I've made a mess here already. I'm trying to keep all my mess in one spot. And I put the towel down here so that it wouldn't make noise when I'm banging the instruments on the table, because I get into trouble about that here at the farm when I'm preparing things in the shed. You're banging things on the table again. Then I probably put them down on the other side, so I probably should have the towel on the other side. Now we've got our sunflowers. The cuts are pretty good on the ends. So we've got 3 different heights of those. Let's put the tallest one in first, which is that one. Just make sure it's all clean all the way down. Now, this is another thing. In the garden, you don't always have perfect flowers, but it doesn't matter when you're designing them for home, because you can hide that with something else that you put in the design. So don't discount anything that's not quite perfect. Lots of times there are ways we can do things around them to make them still useful. So all is not lost if the cockatoos, as was this case, have been in to see if the seed is ready for them to harvest. So this is going to be our focal area. So this is where our eye is drawn to. So we want to make sure that we make impact with that particular design. There might be a point in this where I have to turn it around so I can actually see it, but I'll do as much as I can facing you so you can see how the design builds up over time. So now we've got two more of the sunflowers round about the same height, so we'll put them either side so that it gives us a nice triangular pattern. And you can see already the difference between just the placement of the plant material, thinking about the way you're going to look at it and the symmetry of it. It doesn't have to be symmetrical, it can be asymmetrical, but we'll go into that at a later date. Make sure that the leaves have the opportunity to showcase themselves as well. Now, at this point, I'm going to introduce our little bit of greenery, because as you can see, that's fairly in your face design of colour and form. So I'm going to turn it around so I can get the placement of this one right, but you'll see it in a second. What you will see too is that if we keep those other sunflowers, that grouping nice and close together, the bottom petals cover up the gap we've got in that top one, so that you don't actually notice that it's there. So I'm going to go straight in the middle with that one, put it in like that, and so suddenly our eyes are rested from the rest of the design. We've got this nice long zinnia, which I'm going to put at the back, and that's going to be like a secret that you can almost see through from the front of the design, but in the reflection you'll be able to see it, and so it will add interest to the back of the design. So it's the focal point for the back of the design, if you like. We've also got a dahlia that is more in keeping colour-wise with the zinnia than it is with the yellows, so we'll put that down at the base, at the back. Now, I need to turn it around again. We're going to drop our dahlias right in on the rim, so they will need to be trimmed a little bit. More. Those of you who've seen some of the other videos, when I first got that knife, I was very unsure of it because it was so sharp compared to the other ones I've used. And I'm, as you can see, much more comfortable with it now. I've been using it for a little while, so it's had its cut with my finger, so it's behaving again now. And what I'm doing with this is just trying to have the dahlias underneath the bulk of the design, so we like to have that in and out feeling about a design, and they'll just sit on the rim like that, so that the colour comes down through, goes into the vase. We soften the edge of the vase a little bit by having the placements there. It's still a bit bare, it still needs a little bit more greenery in it to fill it out, and so I'm going to grab some. I haven't got any more of the banks here, but I do have something called woolly bush. This is an Australian native. It comes up, you know, it's a nice big tree it grows into in the end. It lasts for ages, and it has this multi-branched area. So it fills out lots of space for you. Now I might have to take the zinnia out so I can get this one in, because it's a big stem, big stem. Put that out as well. Don't be afraid to redo a design. It's not working the way you want it to. Now that fills out the spaces quite nicely. I have got one more bit of, so I might just tuck that in here. Gives it a little bit more volume at the back. And then we'll put our zinnia back in. Back here. And the dahlia at the bottom. And I think we are done. Bit of manipulation to get them back where you want, because I'm not using the grid, but obviously if I was using the grid they'd all stay in the spots that I want them to be in. There's a bit of a gap there, so we're going to put some more woolly bush in. You see how with this, it's not about how many flowers you've got in there, it's about the contrast of textures and colours and space that you have in the design that will enhance the flowers that you do put in. Filled in all of the gaps with little bits of foliage. So we have our finished designs, obviously much fuller because it's got the volume that's been added by the foliage, but not a whole lot of foliage, and certainly things that add or reflect things that are already in this design. So there you have it. I'll take it back in and see if it meets with his approval, and I hope that that helps you to look at the things you've got in your garden that you might be picking or you might discount because it's not perfect, and actually use them, play with them, use the methods of putting it into a bunch. So if I had put that into a bunch and like that, and then just lifted it out in one go, put the elastic band around it, put it back in, or a bit of string, anything that will hold it together in that shape, then I've got it ready to do all the things to keep it going for the next week or so, week or 10 days. I could use the grid and then just pull things out and replace them. And I guess with the grid, it gives you the opportunity to change it a little bit, to move it around, to find things that are a little bit different. So if you've got a vase that is your favourite or you like to have in a certain place in the house, try using that grid method. And then as you go out into the garden every day or every other day, pick something else. Change it around. It becomes almost an everlasting display of what you've spent time growing in the garden. As I said, I hope that's helped you. I'm Kimberly, and this is Floral Art Online.